this week and want to know if I'd feel. Is that too loud? Yeah. Okay. Can you turn it down more? Okay. Steve called this week and wanted to know if I'd fill in for him, and I said I'd be glad to. And he said he got a chance to go see the Ark. And I've had people who've gone and visited the Ark, and they said it's one of the most incredible displays ever that really gives tribute to who God is and the power and the mighty works of God. And so, anyway, that's a great opportunity. What I'm going to do today is it's something that's spatial, and it's kind of a slideshow, so you're going to appreciate, I think. We've met some most incredible people through the years who've touched our lives and have been such a testimony to how God has worked through people who have had difficulties in life, and yet God has used them in a very special way. And I want to share some of that with you because I think it'll touch your life too. But I wanted to the scripture I wanted to use today, there's really three. In Mark 12:28 to 31, and if you just need to know these scriptures, they're so important for us for everyday living, just for our whole lives. But he said, they came and they asked Jesus, they said, what are we to consider the greatest commandments of all? What's the most important commandments of all for us to adhere to? And Jesus said this, the first and most important one is this, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. God is who we need to pay tribute to. We need to honor him with everything, and that's what he's saying there. Honor God, love God, obey God. And the second one is like that. He said, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. No other commandments are greater than these. So that's it. If we can love God and love our neighbor, we've got it made. You know, that's we're going to adhere to what God wants us to be. And then the other scripture I wanted to share with is Ephesians 2:8 through 10. And he says here, it is for us, it is remembered by grace and not by works that we are saved, that you are saved. And he has lifted us right out of the old life to take our place with him in Christ Jesus in the heavens. Thus he shows for all time the tremendous generosity of the grace and kindness he has expressed toward us in Christ Jesus. It was nothing you could or did do. It was God's gift of grace which saved you. No one can pride himself upon earning the love of God. The fact is that what we are, we owe to the hand of God upon us. Isn't that awesome? But then listen what he says next. But we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do those good deeds which God planned for us to do. God saves us, but then he gives us the privilege and opportunity to do good deeds, good works, to help show his love to our neighbors. And that's what I want to share with you today. Like in James 1:27, he said, religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. You know, that's what we need to busy ourselves with, doing God's work. And I want to share with you, okay, can we get the slides started now? Okay, we're going to show you some slides, and I'm going to share with you some things about some of these people. Okay, and this was out at Rosenblatt Stadium, and we took some of the handicapped people out there, and I'll show you with them about what these are. But they had a space out there for the people in wheelchairs. You could take them out there, and they had a spatial place just for the handicapped people. Okay, now go to the next one. And this is just them, but if you look over to the left, and I don't have another good picture, but the young guy in the blue shirt over there, not the striped one, but on beyond him, that's Dennis. And I met Dennis not too long after I got out of dental school. He was 16 years old. He dove into the water here in South Omaha and broke his neck. 16 years old, left him paralyzed. And anyway, the primary treatment hospital in Omaha at the time was Douglas County, and that's where I went to work, was down there at the dental clinic. And anyway, so I met Dennis, and so here was Dennis in a wheelchair, 16 years old, living in a nursing home, and Dennis is still living in that nursing home in the same room 50 some years later. But he's got the great attitude about life, about what he can do, and he goes to church. He loves the Lord, and but he's overcome that handicap, and I still see him. We take him some food each week just to give him a treat, something different from the nursing home. Okay, go to the next slide, and this was at one of the handicap meetings, and they had a group that got together. They called them victims missionaries, and anyway, this was some of the people, and I'm going to start telling you about some of them. Realm was one of them, Marianne here, Lois, and but okay, go ahead and next slide, and this is Cindy Faulkner, and she had a family of parents she had cerebral palsy, but her family just loved her, took care of her, took her places, did all these things for her, but some of them didn't have that. Some of them didn't have that, but okay, go to the next one. And this is Rilma, and Rilma, when she was 13 years old, came down with polio, left her totally paralyzed, 13-year-old kid, left her paralyzed. And but anyway, what a strong Christian, and she loved the Lord. Now listen to this. When we met her, she was a little bit older, but she took care of her mother, her elderly mother, in her house. And she was in a wheelchair, but she had a little business. Yeah, she had a business. Go ahead and keep it on the slides. Where she actually had sold cards and that and made some money. But what a strong Christian. And she would... Okay, go to the next slide. She read the Bible. She'd read the Bible every day. But this was her mom. She took care of her mom. And so here was somebody who, even though she'd been dealt a very harsh blow at a young age, she overcame and still lived a very productive Christian life. Okay. Now there's just showing you she was reading the Bible. She'd read her Bible all the time. And she used this little mouthpiece. In fact, I made her these mouthpieces, pretty slick. And she could use that to run her adding machine, and she could turn the pages on her Bible, and she could do things like that. But, okay, go to the next slide. Okay, and this is Lois, and Lois Kramer, and she was 14 years old, got polio, left her totally paralyzed except for moving her head, and she spent 8 years in an iron lung as a young kid. Can you imagine that, living in an iron lung as 14, 15 years old? She did that for 8 years, and then they developed the respirators. She was able to get out of the iron lung, and but she did things. But anyway, she learned to paint, and I made her these mouthpieces that she could put her paintbrush on there, and she could paint. You're going to be, it's amazing. Now just go to the next slide, and I'll show you. This is, you can see how she did it. Yeah, that picture, I don't think you can see the rose in the background, but okay, go to the next slide now. And anyway, just showing you how she did it. Now here she's hooked up to the respirator. See, she has to have that to help her breathe. And okay, go to the next one. Now look at these pictures. Isn't that amazing? She would paint those pictures with her teeth, with her mouth. Okay, yeah, now go to the next one. Look at this picture. And that picture hangs out at Midlands Hospital. It's in their lobby. I don't know if it's still there now, but it was in Midlands Hospital. People would walk by that picture, and people would admire that picture, having no idea that it was painted with somebody with their mouth, with their teeth. It's just amazing. But she had a family. When I first met her, her mom was there, and she lived at home, and they helped provide for her, take care of her, Okay, now go to the next slide. Now look at that. To paint all those bricks with your mouth, with your teeth, that's amazing. That's where she went to church. And she painted the... Yeah. It was amazing. Okay, now go to the next slide. This is looking out their back door, and this was a house right out back behind there. She painted their neighbor's house. Okay, now this is the most incredible. She painted portraits of her mom and dad. It's just amazing. But she did that because God had given her a special talent, and she had a special heart and a special commitment. You know, she's a great person. Now, I want you to see the next slide. Now, this picture, all of you need to take, no one else has seen this picture before. I've never shown it before. This is an incredible picture. That's when Lois, not too long after she'd come down with polio, but that man that is there talking to her, all of you, we all owe him a deep debt of gratitude. That's Dr. Jonas Salk, who developed the Salk polio vaccine and probably saved people in this room from polio, from dying, from being handicapped. My cousin was in the 8th grade, and she came down with polio. One night she went to bed. She wasn't feeling real well. She 8th grader, and the next morning, during the night, she got worse, and her parents took her to the hospital, and she passed away the next morning from polio, 8th grade. How many people Dr. Salk saved just like that? It could have been some of us being in the same situation. So go back to that picture one more time. I think that's such an awesome picture. I just got it here about a few months ago, and I wanted people to see his picture of and he came to visit her. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, now these pictures aren't quite as good as Lois's. Marianne Bay painted those pictures more like what maybe we'd have done. Okay, now go to the next slide. Look how she painted them with her feet. With her feet. She had cerebral palsy, and it was so bad, she had to sit on her hands to hold them from, being uncontrolled movements. But she learned to paint with her feet, with her toes. She would answer the phone. She would call with her feet. And you could hardly understand her because her speech was so affected by the cerebral palsy. But what an amazing person. And she had parents that cared about her. They loved on her. They helped her, and they helped her overcome, her handicap. Okay, now one day, but you can see how she would look at how she would paint there with that pencil in her feet, in her toes. Isn't that amazing? Okay, now go to the next one. When you'd call her, but her mom and dad were so good. They just helped her, overcome all these things. But you could hardly understand her when she talked. Anyway, one day they were going to have a handicap meeting. We're going to have a boat ride, and we were going to take people. And so she called me, and she said, I just learned about this guy who lives down the street, a young guy, and he stays at home all the time. He doesn't get out. He's with his mom. It's just him and his mom. And so could you call him and see if he could go? So I called him. Okay, go to the next slide. And Dick. Anyway, so I took Dick on this boat ride, and his mom gave me all these instructions. He can't talk, cannot talk. His mind is normal. Can you imagine that, living in your body? You can't talk. No one can understand you. Anyway, so she'd written out 2 pages of typed instructions for me to take on this boat ride with Dick. And because you could talk to him and you could ask him and he could nod his head or he'd say no, whatever. But anyway, but when we took him back, we had a great time. I spilled more food on him than I got in him, but we had a great time. So when we got back, I said, Dick, would you like to go to church? So he'd never been to church. So we started taking him to church, and that was lasted for 30-some years. But Steve but anyway, what an amazing person he was. But I got to tell you some of his stories. Okay, go ahead and... Anyway, here he is at church. See him in there? And he became everybody's special person. Dick, well, and okay, some others, but... okay, go to the next. And here he is. Do you think he enjoyed going to church? Don't you wish everybody wanted to go to church as bad as Dick did? He loved to go to church. Okay, go ahead. And he ended up having to go to the nursing home, and here he was at the nursing home out there. And okay, go ahead. Next slide. And here a family came to visit him. I was up there that day, and this family from church came to visit him. Isn't that neat? That's what God's called us to do and to be. People who go and show love to our neighbor. Okay, go ahead. Okay, now look at that picture. I just got that picture last week. Steve and Gail, they'd had Dick over to their house. Isn't that a neat picture? That's Trina and Dick and Steve and
that's our daughter, by the way. She's 40.
yeah, and she's lived a tough life too because she's been handicapped. But she's been showing love through her life. Okay, I was at the nursing home one day, and anyway, I walked in, and this lady on the left there was kind of crying, and went over and I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, my roommate just passed away. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And she said this, she said, I'm sorry about my roommate, but she said, you know what bothers me the most? Her family lived here in town, and she's been here for 2 years, and they never came to see her. And she said, it's not that they couldn't have. She said, they're down there in the room taking her things out right now. But that happens way too often. People don't show God's love, especially to their own family members. Okay, go to the next one. And here's Dick, and that was at church with the minister, with Dave Haynes, and everybody loved on Dick. Okay, now go to the next one. Now this is a lady at the nursing home, and Betty. Okay, she would knit with her hands. Look at the things that she could do. Betty, okay, go to the next slide. I'll show you. Look at her hands. Okay, but let me tell you, Betty McQuigg, she was fine. Everything was normal. And when she was in college, she was in nursing school, and she came down with rheumatoid arthritis so incredibly bad. She had to quit school. She had horrible pain. It affected her so badly. Her body became like a piece of board. Nothing moved. If you'd pick her up, I did dental work on her, and you picked her up just like it was picking up a stack of wood. Nothing moved. But what she did was amazing, and what a strong, loving Christian lady. Okay, go to the next one. You can see how she's sitting there. She couldn't sit in a chair. She had to just lean. It was just straight. Okay, go to the next one. That was another doll that she had knitted, that one she was holding there in her hand. Okay, and this is Bill, and I met Bill about the same time as I met Dick. He had cerebral palsy, lived with his mom, and anyway, I met him at one of the meetings. I said, would you like to go to church? Yes, he wanted to go to church, and he was just like Dick. He lived for about 30 years, and he was in church almost every Sunday with us. And so his mom would have to work, just him and his mom, and his mom would have to work. And so I'd say, if you'd call over there when his mom wasn't there, he'd hear this terrible racket. He'd crawl over to the phone. Show the next slide. That's his little dog. His little dog was so sweet. Oh, anyway, we got him typing with his head so he could type things, and he typed out Christmas cards and everything, but he'd type with this typewriter and would do things like that. But when he'd be home alone, I'd say, well, how do you do? What do you do? And he would crawl on the floor. Okay, show the next slide. And we took him out to the nursing home, and here he was at the nursing home. And, okay. In fact, I showed these slides one day at church. This was about a year ago. And somebody come running up to me after church. She said, that's my grandfather in that picture. What are the odds? And he was at the nursing home out there. Anyway, so Bill would crawl around the house when his mom wasn't there. He'd do things on his own. And okay. And here's showing how he would get the phone. He'd crawl over there and knock the phone off of there. He'd make this terrible racket until he could finally say hello, but he could hardly talk. He was hard to understand him, but he'd get down there and would talk on the phone. Okay, now, show the next one. I said to him, what do you do if you get thirsty? So he showed me. He crawled over, got that refrigerator door open, and had a straw and some water. Okay, next slide. And this is Royal. And I got a call one day, and somebody said the Royal had moved down here. He's living in an apartment. He was from Alliance, Nebraska, and he'd come down here, and he was living, and he wanted to know if we could help him get to church. So we started taking Royal to church, but he lived in this apartment, and so he even got a car. Show the next slide. And well, let's see. I'll tell you the story. So anyway, he had driven this little kind of go-kart around there, and so somehow they got him a car. Doctor gave him a permit to get a car, and he drove it to Lincoln to see somebody down there. And I said, "How'd you make out, Royal?" He said, "Pretty good." He said, "I only got off the road once." I said, "You got off the road?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I went down in the ditch, the ditch on that interstate." He said, "I went down in that ditch." And I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "I went right back up on the road, kept going." But he didn't drive very long. So when you see a handicap sticker, I always give him plenty of room. But anyway, back up to that slide. I want you to read on what he had on his refrigerator. Okay, so he is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Well, just an amazing thing. Be grateful for what God has given us and use it. Okay, go to the next one. And this is out at the nursing home, and we had church service out there, and I could tell you stories about a lot of these people, but keep going. And we had one lady out there, Sis was out there for a long time, and she was blind and in a wheelchair. She'd gotten sick when she was like 3 years old, and it left her paralyzed, and she was blind. And every Sunday, she would pray at prayer time. Said, "God, just grant me one thing. Either let me see or let me walk." But it never happened. But she was content. She was content. Okay, keep going. Okay, and I got to tell you about Cletus. I don't want to go too long. So anyway, Cletus, we were at one of the handicap meetings. Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay. We were at one of the handicap meetings, and I met Cletus there, and he was in a wooden wheelchair. No one's ever seen a wooden wheelchair. It was a homemade wooden wheelchair. And his dad was a carpenter and made it for him. Cletus never went to school a day in his life. But anyway, so when I was there and I was trying to talk to him, it was very hard to understand him. But he said this. He said, "Come visit me." He was in a nursing home over in North Omaha, and he didn't have any family down here or anything, and so he said, come visit me. So went over to see him, and anyway, the home looked pretty nice on the outside, but inside they didn't take care of the residents like they should. He sat in his room all the time. He ate in his room. He never got out of his room. Can you imagine that? That's the way it was. But anyway, when I was in there and I was talking to him, and he had a typewriter there, and here's the poem that was on his typewriter that day. He said, when my time is up and I die, will there be someone who will cry, or will, I'm going to cry. He says, or will I die all alone, then be laid beneath a stone? When I fall into that final sleep, will there be someone there to weep, or must I pass from here to there with no one at my side to care? A lonely life have I led, so will I die alone in bed? Won't there be someone at my side when death has claimed me and I have died? These questions haunt me through the night, for I am fighting a losing fight. I have no fear of death itself, but I am afraid of dying by myself. See? That's what God's called us to do, is to love our neighbors. And that touched me so much. He had just typed it out, and he was there by himself. And that's what we need to be doing as Christians, is doing God's servants here while we have opportunity and chance. Okay, well, go on to the next slide, and I'll show you. But we wanted to get Cletus moved from this home. It wasn't good. It took us 2 years. We'd call places, and talk to people, but nobody wanted to take Cletus because he was a lot of work to take care of. And anyway, they had Good Samaritan out in Millard was building a new wing. So I went out and talked to the administrator, and he said, I might consider taking him. He says, we'd have some room, but he says, I'm resigning, and he says, so I have to wait and let the new administrator see if he would want to take Cletus. So I went and talked to Mr. Anderson, was his name, and he was new administrator. And he was a Christian man. He'd been a minister, and he said, you know what? He says, I'd like to go visit him. He says, maybe we could take him. And he took the head of nursing out there, and we went out and we talked. And anyway, he said to Mrs. Bev Harper, he said, Bev, what do you think? And she says, well, we're not really equipped to take people with this kind of handicap. He's a lot of work. And so you could see Cletus just kind of becoming depressed, because it was the same story all over again. And I'll never forget Mr. Anderson, when she was done, Mr. Anderson he sat in his chair. He looked Cletus right in the face and said, Cletus, if you're willing to take a chance on us, we're willing to take a chance on you. And that was just what he said. And Cletus about jumped out of his wheelchair. It was so amazing. And so he said, how quick can you get here? Well, I had a friend had a pickup. And we took him over, riding in the back of a pickup with everything he had. He was sitting in his wheelchair, and I held onto the chair. Drove slow. He had a TV, he had his typewriter, he had a little dresser. That's all he had. So anyway, we got over there. So here he was coming from a home that he never got out of his room. He never got to see people, visit people. Okay, go to the next slide. We pulled up to the Good Samaritan, and Mr. Anderson came running out, helped us take him down out of the pickup. And anyway, he took him in, wheeled him all around, introduced him to everybody, and made him part of their family out there. Yeah, it was amazing. But anyway, so Cletus, you can back up. We don't want this picture quite yet. Back up. Anyway, so Cletus, he'd be sitting out, and they had him sitting out in the hall of the nurse's station, and a lady came in, her dad was in there, and she said, what's this place coming to that they're letting the likes of him in here? Yeah. And the nurse, Marlene Gray, was a nurse, and she was so sweet, just wonderful. And anyway, she went down and told Mr. Anderson what had happened. And so he came down and got Cletus, took him down to his office, and said, Cletus, I'm so sorry that someone would say that, and you heard that. He said, Mr. Anderson, don't worry about it. He said, I've heard it all my life. I've heard it. People can be so cruel. But anyway, he went back to his room and he wrote this poem. Listen to this. He said, bless this home. Dear Lord, bless this lovely home. Please keep it from all harm. Bless those who are so good to me, who shelter me from life's storm. Bless those who are so ill and ease their dreadful pain. Let them know how you suffered too, that you suffered not in vain. Bless those who are in charge of this heaven here on earth, and lighten their mighty task as they fill our hearts with mirth. Let me forget the snide remarks that I hear some people use. Let them know just what it's like to walk 1 mile in my shoes. Bless my friends who changed my life by finding this home for me. Let me be patient with everyone to show my great love for thee. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, But Cletus never went to school one day in his life, ever. And he wrote over 300 poems. But anyway, he started he heard somebody on the radio reading poetry, and he thought, I could do that if I had a way to do it. And his dad worked up a typewriter. He had the idea for it. His dad worked up a typewriter, and he started typing this home. But I want you to listen to a couple more of his poems, and we got it. It says, my eyes were opened wide one day in a very strange and funny way. My eyes were opened, but I could not see all the gifts that God had given me. I met a man upon the street. He used a chair, for he had no feet. Yet as he wheeled himself along, upon his lips there was a song. I saw some children the same day. One of the little ones did not play. I asked, why aren't you playing, dear? He ignored me. He could not hear. I saw a girl, lovely and fair, with rosy cheeks and golden hair. When I walked past, she smiled at me, but her world was dark. She could not see. My eyes were opened wide that day, and since that day, this prayer I pray, O God above, please let me see the many gifts you've given me. Cletus wrote that. Okay, yeah, it's amazing. Okay, and then I like this one. He says, it only takes a little bit to lighten somebody's load as they go traveling down life's long, uncertain road. Just a nod, a friendly smile, a clasp of a friendly hand shows the one who's feeling low there's some who understand. It only takes a little time to help somebody along, to put a smile on their face and their heart, a happy song. One kind word is all it takes if you mean just what you say. Say it with a smile, friend, for a smile goes a long, long way. It only takes a little love upon somebody's part to make somebody's life worthwhile and cheer a lonely heart. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read one more and then it says riches. Some people count their money that they have, and this is going to go to our next slide, but some people count their money that they have saved from day to day, while some value their property that they purchased along the way. I count my wealth in friends I've made, and in memories of them I hold. Each thought I have in recalling them is like a diamond set in gold. Each kind word they have said to me is worth more than all the land. It's worth far more than all the money, just to know there's some who understand. I treasure each letter that they write. They span the miles that we're apart. Every word they write is a jewel to me, as in memory the teardrops start. I envy no man on God's green earth, no matter how rich he may be. Give me my friends, and I consider myself 1,000,000 times richer than he. Isn't that something? Okay, now go to the next slide. Okay, now I'm not advertising beer, but you're. But I want you to know. One day I was up at the nursing home, and Harold, his wife worked up there. Marilyn was a nurse up there. But anyway, Harold was up there, and I knew Harold. But anyway, he said to his wife, he said, that's Ed over there. That's Ed. And I said, who's Ed? And he said, he's over there. He said, Ed's a millionaire. Ed See, back up to the one with the, okay, go back one more. Okay, now if you can read on the side of that building, it says the Hollings. Okay. It's Ed Hollings, and he said they've given millions of dollars to Creighton. He said they've got, he said they've done a lot with their money. In fact, there's a street named after them over in Millard, Hollings Boulevard. He said that's Ed Hollings. Well, anyway, Ed, he was over there, and anyway, I got to be friends with Ed. He was there, but okay, now go to the next slide. The stores. Okay, well, Art Stores was a resident out there already. And have you heard of the Stores Mansion? There's a Stores Mansion in town. They had the big brewery in town, Stores. And in fact, if you go out to the airport, you go down the Stores Expressway. Okay, well, Art, he and I got to become good friends, but he was there at the nursing home too. So here's two people who, they've had lots and lots of money. I could say they're millionaires, Okay, now, I want you to sit at this table. There's three people sitting at this table. It's two millionaires and one who didn't have a dime to his name. It's Dick. Didn't have a dime to his name. Now, I want you to tell me, can you tell who are the millionaires? You know what? Yeah, if you have the Lord, you're a millionaire. We have everything in life that matters if you have the Lord. And that's what he says. You know what? What's the most important commandments? Love God. And second, love your neighbor. And that's what it's all about. That's what counts in life. And these people have all taught. I've got lots of stories of other people just like this who've just, what an incredible impact they've made in their life, even though they had difficulties, handicaps to deal with every day. But that's what we have to do in life. We have to just turn it all over to the Lord and live and serve God the best we can. And so we have opportunities. All of us have opportunities to show God's love. And that's what we need to be doing. So thank you.